Hey everybody! Today we will be focusing on the female Pokemon Go trainer outfit. I'm mainly going to be talking about how to make the romper and the top in detail, but I'll talk about the other accessories as well. I know there are other styles of Pokemon trainers, but hopefully this will give you a general idea on how to get started on yours. For the romper, I decided to construct it into two separate pieces, shorts and a tank top. They will later be combined to make one piece. For the shorts portion, I used a basic McCall's pattern and a stretch denim in black. You can also use a spandex if you would like, but I thought the denim would add some variety to the design. I will also be using the denim for the top portion of the outfit, as well as a gray spandex from the Yaya hotline. First, we will start with the shorts. You are going to cut out the pattern, lay it out, and cut it out. This will give you your basic body and you can add your own details after you sew it together. When you sew the pieces together, I recommend using a based stitch first, that way you can try them on and make sure they fit. Once you're satisfied with your fit, you can either use a zigzag stitch or serge the edges. You will also want to leave an extra 3 to 4 inches unsewn on the lower inner edge of your shorts. That way you can add your trim without having to go back and seam rip like I did. For the trim, I took the gray spandex and folded it right sides together. I then cut out a 3-inch strip. Next, you will take your strip and pin the two edges to the wrong side of the shorts. The reason for this is so you can take your trim and fold it towards the outside of the shorts. You will then have a clean edge on your leg hole opening and the seam will be hidden under the fold. If you don't prefer this method, you can also sew your trim on right sides together and fold it downward to make the bottom edge of your shorts. You can use a zigzag stitch to sew your trim on, or you can serge it. Here you can see the raw edge, but when I fold the trim upward towards the top of the shorts, I have clean looking edges on both the top and the bottom. Next, I'm going to serge the raw edge of the trim to make it look a little bit nicer, but you do not have to do this part since it will be hidden. The final step will be turning your shorts right sides together and sewing that 3 to 4 inches you left open for the trim as well as the trim itself. Here you can see what your trim will look like once it is finished. You will just need to repeat it for the other leg hole and then set your shorts aside so you can start on your top. For the tank top portion, you can either get a knit tank top pattern or take a tank top you already own and use it to trace on your fabric. If you are going to use the tracing method, you will take your denim and fold it right sides together. You will then trace the back of your tank top onto it and cut it out. I went on ahead and added a few extra inches to the bottom of the top just to be safe. Once you have cut out the back, take that piece, lay it on the denim again, and cut out your front portion. This way they are exactly the same and will line up perfectly. My trainer's romper has a gray section right down the middle of the top. For this part, I took the front portion of the top that I had just cut out and traced it onto the gray spandex. I then messed around with various curves until I got the shape I wanted. You will take the gray shape and trace it to the front denim part of your top. You will then cut out that shape you have just traced onto your denim, making sure to leave 5/8 of an edge seam allowance so you can sew it together. You should now have 3 pieces total for your top, 2 edges that are denim and 1 center that is spandex. You are going to pin each denim edge to the center gray piece right sides together. You will then sew the edges together using a based stitch. Once it is sewn, it may have some strange curves going on because it is a stretch fabric, but when you try it on, it should fit tightly and look nice. Before you can do your test fitting, you will need to pin the front portion of the top to the back portion of the top, and then sew it together using a based stitch. Make sure not to sew together the neck portion or the armholes so you can try it on. You should now have a basic layout of how your top will look and fit. If you are happy with your fit, you can start to focus on the collar portion and the armholes. I found the collar to be the trickiest part of this top. Since you are having a stretch fabric sewn to a less stretchy fabric, some weird curves and folds happen. So my advice is to just play around with as many curves as you can. The armholes will also need some minor adjusting, but shouldn't be as complicated as the top. Once again, just play around with curves to get a shape that you like. Before I continue with finishing the edges of the collar and the sleeves, I want to add a hidden zipper to the back of my suit. If you do not know how to sew in a zipper, there are plenty of YouTube tutorials out there that can explain it a lot better than I can. For this top, I used a 12-inch hidden zipper and then cut a 12-inch slit down the center of the back. I then did a rolled hem to each edge of the slit and sewed on the zipper. Once you have your zipper sewn on, I recommend doing another test fitting to make sure you are happy with the fit of your top. Before I add the purple detail to the front of the top, I am going to serge the back and front of the top together, as well as finish the edges of the sleeves. For the edges of the sleeves, you have a few options. You can either do a basic hem, a rolled hem, or what I like to do is serge the edge of the sleeve and then take that edge, fold it under, and sew another seam on top to make a finished hem. Any method will do. I just find this method saves me some time and is less tedious than the other two. For the purple detail on the top, there are a lot of methods you can do to add it. I had a lot of issues with the ones I used, but I'm going to try to explain best what worked for me. First, I used Heat and Bond, which is a fabric adhesive that you apply with heat. I have used this adhesive on many of my previous spandex suits, including Rogue and Rosalina, and have never had any issues. However, the Yaya Han fabric is a little less porous than the Joanne swimwear spandex, so the Heat and Bond didn't hold as well as it has for me in the past. Regardless of what fabric you're using, I still recommend using the Heat and Bond to get a precise placement of your shapes. To make the shapes, I traced the top to a piece of paper and messed around with different proportions to get the right shapes. Once I had my template ready, I took a square of Heat and Bond and ironed it to a square of the purple spandex. The purple spandex is a polyester fabric and will melt if you put the iron directly on it. To avoid this, you will take your Heat and Bond square and put it face down on the purple spandex. You will then iron the back of the Heat and Bond and it should stick fine to the purple spandex. This will avoid any burning. Once you have your spandex and Heat and Bond together, you can then take your shapes and trace them to the piece. Cut out all of your traced pieces and then you will be ready to iron them onto the suit. Next, you will need to prep your top for the purple pieces to be added. I put the top on and traced some lines on where the collar was going to lay and the center of the suit as well. As you can see here, I no longer have the curve that I had originally cut for my collar because I burnt my suit while trying to iron on the Heat and Bond pieces. I had to completely remake the gray center and start over. Just keep in mind that mistakes do happen and it takes practice. This method can be really tricky when it comes to spandex since it's so heat sensitive, so I recommend doing some test swatches on your spandex, messing with different heats on your iron as well as different amounts of time you want to leave the iron on the spandex. You will definitely need to use an ironing barrier between the fabric and the iron. There are a few different ways you can do this. There is ironing paper that you can put between the iron and the spandex, or there are also ironing cloths that help as well. With that disclaimer, let's continue with the suit construction. You will need to seam rip the gray edges from the denim that you basted earlier so you can lay the purple edges under them and have a nice sewn finish once they are all ironed on. At this point, you can peel off the paper edges on the back of your shapes from the Heat and Bond. You can then just lay the purple pieces out on the front of the suit, messing with different spacing and layouts that you like. Once you have something you're satisfied with, you will be ready to iron. To really get the pieces to stay, you will want to use the highest heat setting on your iron, but make sure that you have no steam coming out. I then put a piece of ironing paper over all of the shapes and iron them down. Make sure to move the iron around frequently and don't leave it in one spot for too long or you will melt the fabric like I did. Once you are finished ironing the front, you will want to turn your suit inside out and iron the back as well where the heat and bond is. This will give it a little bit of an extra hold. Just don't forget to put your ironing paper down as well. At this point, if you used the Joann spandex, you shouldn't need to do any more and your heat and bond will hold just fine through all of your wears. I wasn't aware that the heat and bond wouldn't stick very well once I wore it for a while, so I didn't feel the need to do anything else, but if you are going to use the Yaya Han fabric, I would recommend going the applique route instead. You can just add your shape to your suit with some Wonder Tape and then use a tight zigzag stitch or applique stitch around the edges to secure it to the suit. When you are satisfied with the placement of your purple pieces, you will just want to take your gray fabric and sew it right sides together to your denim fabric. You can then finish the edges by serging or pressing. The final step of your top will be finishing the collar. You can do a rolled hem or you can add bias tape. I decided to go the bias tape route because I thought it looked nicer and there was no seam showing. Didn't get any footage of me adding the bias tape because I was in a rush, but there are plenty of great YouTube tutorials that tell you how to put it on. The last part of the romper will be adding the top to the bottoms. Put both the top and the bottoms on at the same time and mark where you want them to meet on your body. Once you have them marked, you will want to put them right sides together and either pin them or use Wonder Tape and sew them. You will just need to finish the edges by pressing or serging and then your suit will be done. The next piece of clothing to tackle will be your sweater. For the sweater, I bought two different sweatshirts, one in dark blue and one in light blue for the trim. For the main body of the jacket, I put on the blue sweatshirt inside out and marked where I would need to cut it. The sweater on the trainer is very short and so are the sleeves, so I definitely needed to cut those down, as well as take in the sweatshirt because it was a little large for me. Once I had everything marked, I cut the sleeves and the bottom portion of the sweater off, as well as sewed and serged the lines I marked to take the top in. Once you have your basic layout and shape, you are going to put your shirt back on to mark where you're going to cut out the center collar. This part will be a basic triangle shape that will show your upper chest. You will want it to be big enough so you can see the purple detail, but not too big to where you see the edges of the gray meeting with the black denim. You can play around with different sizes until you're satisfied with the size of the shape. I recommend starting with a small shape and then working your way out. While you are cutting fabric off, make sure you leave enough on your edge so you can fold it over and make a hem along the chest. You will just need to pin your edges and do a rolled hem or even just a regular hem is fine. If your trainer's suit has a zipper down the jacket, this is the part where you will add it. The next part will be adding all of the trim. For this, I took the light blue sweater and cut off all the ribbed blue trim pieces. First, I took the longest piece of trim from the bottom of the sweatshirt and pinned it right sides together to the bottom of my jacket. Since this is a stretchy fabric, I do recommend using a zigzag stitch. You can also serge the edges if you would like. Then I turned the jacket inside out and sewed a seam right down the middle, starting at the bottom of the trim to the tip of the triangle. This made the jacket look like it had a zipper, but still kept it as a one-piece pullover. Next, you will trim your sleeves, which you will use the exact same method you just used for the trim on the bottom of the jacket. I was in a little bit of a con crunch, so I did not get any footage of me adding the collar, but it will be done the exact same as the other trims. Once all the trim has been added, your jacket should be complete. I didn't get footage of me making all of the accessories, but I will cover a few. First, the hat. You will just need a plain baseball cap, and then you will need some yellow fabric. You will cut out the shapes you need according to the size of the hat. Lay them out until you are happy with how they look. You can either glue them on or hand stitch them on if you would like. I used a hand stitch embroidered edge for mine. You can try to put them on with a sewing machine if you would like, but I have no idea how to sew hats in a sewing machine, so I will leave that up to you. For the belt, I used two thin cheap belts I got from the thrift store. One was already black and the other one was a light color that I could paint blue. You will either want to use a leather paint such as Angelus leather paint or fabric paints for this. I used a blue and a white fabric paint to mix together to get a lighter blue. I would not recommend using regular acrylic paint because it will crack. You're going to be moving a lot and so is your belt, and you do not want cracked edges all over it. Once I was finished painting the belt, I glued both belts together along the edge using hot glue. I then took some craft foam and glued it along the back of the two belts as well for some reinforcement. For the belt buckle emblem, I just took some craft foam and drew out the shapes. I then sealed the foam with Mod Podge, and once that was dry, I painted the colors I needed and glued them together. I then glued that piece to the belt. To put the belts on, I simply used the buckles that they already have on them. You can also add your own fastener if you would like, or use Velcro. For the leggings, I simply bought a pair of pre-made leggings. To add the stripe, I took the leggings and cut about 3 inches off of each edge of the leg. I then took a 3-inch purple stripe from the same spandex that I used for the chest detail and pinned it right sides together to where I made the cuts on the legging. You will then want to sew them using a zigzag stitch or a serge and hem the footholes. The few other accessories I made were the gloves and the necklace. I did not get any footage of these, but for the gloves I simply took a pair of black gloves and cut off the finger holes and painted on 2 stripes. For the necklace, I just used a piece of ribbon that I cut and added Velcro together to make a necklace. You should now have a completed Pokemon trainer suit and are ready to catch them all. Happy hunting!